Hello, my name is Ben, and my book was Glow Kids by Nicholas Kardaras. Um, Overall, I like the book because it taught me a lot of things about how technology can be addicting, especially for kids like me. And Kardaras, he supplied a lot of research and evidence to support his claims. So overall, the book's pretty good. So one of the big ideas of Glow Kids is that screens are addicting, and in order for us to be convinced that we need to do something about this problem, I think that the reader deserves to know why screens are addicting in the first place. So, Kardaras explains that one of the reasons that screens can be addicting is that because they can have a dopamine, dopaminergic dopaminergic effect. So, essentially, the reason why we do certain things can be explained by dopamine. So, for example, survival behaviors such as eating and sex. When we do them, uh, we release dopamine, which is a feel-good neurotransmitter. So it makes us feel good, and basically repeat that behavior because it feels good, and we want to feel good again. So that's the reason why certain survival behaviors cause this release of dopamine. Um, but there is a problem when screens release dopamine because they can become super addicting. So, research by Coep in 1998 found that video games increase dopamine as much as sex does, and that's about a 100% increase. So, this is a problem because adults, they have the willpower to refrain from engaging with tech due to this release of dopamine, but because of their frontal cortex, which controls impulsivity, it's fully developed. Whereas kids, they're not going to be able to have this willpower to refrain from engaging with this tech over and over again because their frontal cortex is not fully developed yet. So, one strength of the co-op study that I previously mentioned was that it was established a cause and effect relationship between video games and this release of dopamine. So we know for a fact that video games playing video games does increase dopamine. It's also a pretty easy study to replicate. Just by using brain imaging scanning such as PET scans, you're able to see how much dopamine is released in someone's brain. So that means it has a high reliability. Some limitations of this study are that it has a low heuristic validity because it only tested video games, so we don't know how many more applications this has. I mentioned that screens cause this dopamine release, but that's sort of a illusory correlation on my part because this study didn't really test all sorts of screen usage from like internet usage, social media usage. It only tested video game usage, so I'm illusory. There's no way for certain to know that, or I'm correlating screen usage with dopamine because of the study when that's not really plausible to say. Alright, so another big idea of the study was that technology in general can cause cancer in some sort of way. So basically, every single piece of technology we use, they emit radiation known as electromagnetic fields or EMFs, and in particular phones, they release radiation known as non-ionizing radio frequency. And Kardaras claims that this is supposedly similar to microwaving our brains because we're around technology so much. So, one study that looked at this was done by the World Health Organization in 2010, and they found that participants who used cell phones for 10 or more years had double the rate of brain glioma, which is a type of tumor. And they also found that mobile phone users, they had an increase in acoustic neuroma brain cancer. So, obviously the study is only correlational in nature. So the use of cell phones was correlated with this increase in cancer rates. So we don't know if any other confounding variables affected this increase. One of these variables could have been like someone's job requirements. If they're like using a cell phone for 10 or more years, there's a lot of variability in that. This variability, it may be seen in something like a person's job requirements. So if they're working an office job versus like a construction job, the person working an office job is going to be exposed to a lot more technology, or they're going to have to use their cell phone a lot more, even though supposedly they've been using them for 10 or more years. Both people have been using them for 10 or more years. But to kind of counter this limitation, the study had a lot of participants. So regardless of variability, we know that just using your cell phone for long periods of time, which is pretty inevitable for everyone this era, but yeah, it can lead to increased rates of cancer due to the radiation emitted by them. So some of my takeaways from this book, based on what I just mentioned about phones emitting radiation and whatnot, I've started to not keep my phone in my pocket as often, just because it's kind of close to, or I don't want it as close to my body because of the radiation it's emitting. But I also don't want to freak out about it, just because it does emit radiation. There's a lot of other things that emit radiation, such as microwaves and the sun and being on an airplane. So, I mean, I shouldn't live my life being scared of getting cancer just because I have a phone around me. But yeah, even though this book was mainly targeted towards parents, because it's about how kids are becoming addicted to their screens, and we need to stop them basically from becoming addicted, because there's a lot of negative things associated with screen addiction. But I think kids such as me can learn a lot from this book, because we're able to reflect on our own lives and evaluate how addicted we are to our screens. And in terms of myself, I wouldn't say I'm that addicted in terms of like comparing myself to the examples that Kardaras gave in the book. There are a lot of extreme cases that, as an addiction psychologist, I think he observed. I'm definitely not as extreme as those cases, but occasionally I do find myself being on my phone for way too long, almost as if I'm glued to my screen, because I'm just scrolling over and over again through YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, all of that. So through this book, I was able to see sort of why screen addiction is bad, of course, and why I need to change my ways and how I can do that. So one thing I've done is just setting time limits on apps I feel like I'm addicted to. So yeah. Some things that I thought Kardaras could have expanded on were any positive effects of screen usage. I know that in the cognition unit in IB Psych, we learned about how video games can improve some, can't think of it right now, but hand-eye coordination, I think it was. So yeah, I know I felt this book was kind of biased. Obviously, it's trying to make a point that screen usage is bad, but I feel like it'd also be important to include both sides of the story so that parents can make a more informed and educated decision about what they should and shouldn't do. And I also thought that Kardaras, I know this book was made in like 2016, or written and published in 2016, but I would have liked to see a section about how certain technology is designed to be addictive, like maybe a phenomenon about how scrolling